Hello friends, I'm Aisling. I read books and then talk about them on the internet, and today we have a bit of a booktube tradition. So we have the mid-year freak out book tag. I never say that in the right order, but never mind. I'm going to just get right into it. Question number 1. Best book that you have read so far in 2024. I actually kind of struggled with this a little bit because I feel like this year has been a little bit of a flat reading year for me. I have given one book 5 stars, but I'm actually going to talk about that later in the video. Kind of like cheating a little bit, but I don't want to talk about the same book 3 times over. What I'm going to suggest for this one instead is Cloud Cuckoo Land by Anthony Doerr. This book was written by the same guy that wrote All the Light You Cannot See, but it actually potentially feels like it's written by a different author. It's still got really lovely, lyrical, beautiful writing. It's still got quite short chapters. It still does encompass a little bit of a historical fiction, but we follow some different timelines. We're set in the past, the present, and the future. And this book is much more ambitious and unusual in its scope. It has different characters set over different timelines. It's essentially a book about a book, which I adore. It kind of fundamentally felt to me like a tale of hope and human connection. I don't know how to talk about this book. It is very unusual. It's very much a literary contemporary fiction novel, but it is also so much more than that. And I don't know. I think you should look this book up, and if you feel like it might be something you'll enjoy, give it a go because it's really good. It's really good. It's not my favourite book of the year, but it's very close. Next question then is the best sequel you've read so far in 2024. And this answer is absolutely not cheating whatsoever. I've just finished this book, and this book is The Mad Ship by Robin Hobb, which is the sequel to The Ship of Magic, and these books are part of the Live Ship Traders trilogy, which are part of the overarching series The Realm of the Elderlings by Robin Hobb. And let me tell you, I wasn't 100% sold on Ship of Magic, so I missed Fitz. I felt a bit weird without him, but The Mad Ship has absolutely kind of upended maybe what I felt about Ship of Magic. It completely subverts my expectations. Robin Hobb 100% makes you work for it, but I will say there's information in this book that I probably had to read about 14, 15, 1600 pages in the trilogy to get. But oh my god, when I got there I was like, Robin Hobb, you've done it again. But the thing is, it doesn't feel like work when you're working for it because her books are so readable. They're very slow fantasy books and they're very character driven, but they are stunning. I don't know what it is about Robin Hobb's writing. I was about 600 pages into this book. It's a chunky monkey. It's about 900 pages long. And I was like, how? Like, very little has really happened in 600 pages, and yet I was absolutely enthralled for all of those pages and right through to the end of the book. Her writing fascinates me. I'm so excited to read more of Robin Hobb's books. I'm not going to get into what this book is about specifically, because if you're going to read these books you should start with Assassin's Apprentice, which is the first book in the Farseer trilogy. Use the internet for help when you're trying to figure out which Robin Hobb books to read in which order, because there are quite a few of them. But I'm so excited to read Ship of Destiny, which is the next book in this trilogy. It's gone places I wasn't expecting, and I'm really tempted to just pick up the next book and get cracking again. Next up then is a new release book that you want to read but you haven't quite read yet, and the book I'm choosing for this is, no surprise, All Fours by Miranda July. I loved Miranda July, was obsessed with Miranda July, her books, her short stories, her film work. There's something really quirky, and I mean that in the best way possible, about Miranda July's work. So this book in particular, we follow a middle-aged artist who announces that she's going to go on a cross-country trip. So she's going to drive from LA to New York, and off she heads on her trip, only to pull off the freeway about 20 minutes into her drive and actually just go and stay in this nondescript motel. I don't really know anything more about that, and I'm okay with that. So I've heard this book described as like a fever dream, as absurd, as romantic, as a tender reinvention of the sexual. Like, It just sounds right up my street yet again, and I believe that what you're getting from this book is not maybe what you might expect you're getting from this book. So in typical Miranda July fashion, it very much subverts expectations, which I think if you're familiar with and already enjoy her work, you'll be delighted to hear. We don't get many books written about the inner workings of like a 45-year-old woman's life and brain, so this is definitely one that I'm really looking forward to picking up very soon. Next up then is my most anticipated release of the second half of 2024. And the really obvious answer here is Intermezzo by Sally Rooney. I cannot wait for that book. I am a big Sally Rooney stan. I can't speak highly enough of her, but you've all probably heard about that book. So I'm actually going to choose a different one, which I'm also really equally excited for, and that is The Witch's Guide to Magical Innkeeping by Sangu Mandana. So one of my surprise favourite books of last year was The Very Secret Society of Irregular Witches. And that book was so cozy, so cute, absolutely not what I was expecting, hit me right in the heart, loved it. And this upcoming book is a book that's set in the same world but doesn't follow the same characters. So we follow a witch who has essentially lost the majority of her magical powers, and she gets a second chance to kind of get her powers back on track and to get her life back on track. She has lost her powers after resurrecting somebody quite close to her, and we follow her as she just toddles about her life and runs a lovely little inn as well, which sounds so cute and so cozy, and I just hope it's as wonderful as The Very Secret Society of Irregular Witches, because I adored that book as somebody who's not super into romance. So yeah, I'm really excited for this one. I can't wait for September. Some great reads. Also, Lucy Wood's debut novel is out in September as well. So September is going to be a banger for new books. Speaking of new releases though, the next question is my biggest disappointment so far of this year. And I'm really sad to say that that is actually Hagstone by Sinead Gleeson. So I adore Sinead Gleeson's writing. Can't tell you how much I really prize her book Constellations, which is a book of sort of essays about the author herself and her personal life and just dealings with being a woman in Ireland and living in a female body and the things that come along with that. It was definitely a book that just hit me in the gut, and I've read some of her other writing, and Sinead Gleeson is really well known in the Irish literary scene, and this is her debut novel. I'm going to caveat this by saying it's not a bad book, but I just had really high expectations for it. So we follow Nell, who lives on an isolated Irish island, and she's an artist, but she's a little bit down on her luck and subsidises her income by cleaning toilets, until she's approached by this really evasive, isolated group of women called the Ineans, and they want to commission her to create a piece of work for them. And I'm going to leave it at that. It feels really strange. It has elements of magical realism and honestly sounded like something that I would adore. And as I said, this book isn't bad by any means. The writing is really sharp. It's really beautiful. I just personally didn't love the plot. I didn't love the ending. I thought the ending felt a little bit jilted, possibly rushed. The plot in and of itself wasn't as engaging as I hoped it might be. That said, I still think this is a book worth reading, and I will absolutely be reading any more books that Gleeson publishes because I love her writing and she is honestly such a great non-fiction author, and I really would love to see what else she does with fiction. Next up then is my biggest surprise, and that I'm gonna say is Like Water for Chocolate by Laura Escovel. So this is a Mexican book and it's set in Mexico, and we follow the all-female De La Cruz family, and we follow the different generations, we follow their lives, their traditions, their relationships. Even in spite of my having only given this book 3 stars, I read it in January and I still think about it regularly, so there's something in that, I think. So the youngest daughter, Tita, She stays at home with her mum, and she has been condemned by Mexican tradition to not marry and to stay home and to look after her mother until her mother's death. But as will happen, Tita does happen to fall in love with a man named Pedro, and he is seduced by the food that she cooks. So this book is sort of interspersed with recipes as well, which I found really cool. It was like an interesting little literary tool. They unfortunately can't be together because of Tita's mom, so Pedro ends up marrying Tita's older sister in an effort essentially to be closer to Tita, and they sort of circle each other for decades, but they never actually get to be together. And this book is just so full of tragedy, cruelty, bad luck. It's a strange reading experience, and I wasn't expecting from this book what I got from this book. I had never heard of this book before, and I just said, hey, I'm gonna give it a go, and I'm really glad that I did. It's definitely something that's just very unusual, and it's a quick read as well. It's quite short. Definitely worth a read, I think. Next up then is your new favourite author. So we're going to jump back to the first question where I was asked about my favourite book, and I gave you a book that wasn't my favourite book. So this author wrote the only book that I've given 5 stars this year, and this author is Ocean Vuong. I have read and have loved Ocean Vuong's poetry, and he is one of my favourite poets, but I read his novel On Earth We're Briefly Gorgeous about 2 years ago, and it was definitely a case of right book, wrong time, because I didn't gel with it very well, and I only gave it 3 stars, which who was I? What was wrong with me? So I reread this novel this month in June prior to going to see an event with Ocean Vuong, and let me tell you, this book just hit me so hard. I was so surprised. I felt like I was reading a different book. I didn't understand how I couldn't remember so much of it, and we're going to cut Aisling from 2 years ago some slack and just say she was wrong, and that's okay. So as I said, I felt myself drawn back to reading this book, and this time around I absolutely mentioned it. I loved the slow kind of abstract pacing. It's a novel about family, about race, about language, love, queerness, hope, and friends, it is stunning. It is so beautiful. You can tell that Vuong is first and foremost a poet. The writing is so poetic, so lyrical. It's the only book, as I've mentioned, that I've given 5 stars to this year. I'm stingy with my 5 stars, but I just couldn't. I couldn't not. Honestly, flawless, no notes. It has absolutely solidified Ocean Vuong as one of my favourite authors of all time. I actually made a little reading blog about this video, which I will link here. Next question is newest fictional crush. Racked my brains over this one's pals, and I don't have an answer to this one, and I don't think I had an answer to this one last year either, so I'm just going to skip it. Next question then is your newest favourite character, and straight away I thought of this character, and that is our titular character Circe from Circe by Madeline Miller. And Circe is a Greek retelling that centres our titular character Circe, who is born a goddess, and she is the daughter of a powerful and terrible father and a beautiful and cruel mother. Unfortunately, she is rejected immediately after being born and is honestly treated horribly by her parents and her younger siblings and pretty much everybody around her. But something happens throughout the course of this novel, and Circe ends up exiled to an island, and she spends her days by herself, and I just found the character development in this to be brilliant. In the beginning, she's really meek and afraid, but over the years we see her take control of her life and her destiny. I absolutely adored this book, particularly Circe's character arc. Madeline Miller is an excellent author. This is like a contemporary literary novel, but it's also a Greek mythological retelling, and I thought that maybe this book wouldn't be for me, but I thought wrong. This book is great. Circe is great, and again, I did a whole reading vlog on this video. We'll pop it somewhere. Next up then is a book that made you cry, and I tried to find another book, but I found myself coming once again back to On Earth We're Briefly Gorgeous by the lovely Ocean Vuong. So I've mentioned this book as my 1 5-star read of this year, and in it we follow Little Dog, and he is a Vietnamese immigrant into the United States. So he was born in Vietnam but is raised in America, and his mom is Vietnamese and he lives with his mom and his grandmother. And this book is essentially a letter written from a son to a mother, but surprisingly the mother can't read, so it's potentially going to be a letter that's never actually read. This is very much a character driven novel, and the focus here for me fell so much on the language that's used, on the writing, more so than the plot. That said, there is a plot and the plot is really wonderful, while at times being really harrowing and desperately sad, hence the book that made you cry. It honestly had me bawling my eyes out, but it was so worth it. What a book. Like, honestly, what a book. And then a book that made you happy. So going to caveat this one by saying it's not necessarily a happy book, but I really just took a lot of joy out of it, and that book is The Toy Makers by Robert Dinsdale. This is an incredibly cozy read about a magical toy shop. So we're set in Papa Jack's Toy Emporium, and it is a historical fantasy that starts in London in 1917. In the Toy Emporium, they create and sell magical toys that seem to come alive. So Papa Jack's sons, Casper and Emil, are now of age where they can join the family trade and begin to create toys and magic of their own. One day along comes Kathy, and Kathy is harbouring a bit of a secret and is dealing with something that's very difficult, especially for a woman of her age and at that time. But they take her in Papa Jack's and they love her anyway. This book is richly detailed and imaginative. It spans over the course of a number of years. It feels really nostalgic. It feels really magical. It definitely feels like a book that would be great to read in and around Christmas as well, if you're looking for something kind of cozy and nice to read around Christmas. As I've said though, this book, it does get a bit dark, so take that as you will. But personally, I loved it. It made me so happy. I love a cozy read, and this was definitely that. And then the next question is the most beautiful book that you've bought this year. And I didn't actually have much to choose from, surprise, surprise, because I haven't bought that many books this year. Amazing, I'm so surprised at myself. But the two books that I've kind of come up with have been Hagstone by Sinead Gleeson. I just absolutely love the pink against the green and the cliffs. I just thought design wise this was really nice. But also The Familiar by Leigh Bardugo, and this one was a new release as well this year. So we're set during the Spanish Inquisition and we follow a young housemaid who can perform miracles. It's discovered by the family that she works for that she can perform these miracles, and they decide to use her to kind of better their position within society because they're a bit down on their luck as well. They're quite cruel to her. She sort of ends up in like a magical tournament, and I'm going to leave it there at that. I'm not going to get too much more into the plot, but I really love this cover as well. It's very gothic. It really tells, you can tell a lot about the book just by the style of this cover. I really liked it. Really liked Hagstone cover as well. Those are probably the two most beautiful books that I've bought so far this year. And then last but certainly not least, what book or books do you need to read by the end of this year? And I will always caveat this by saying I don't need to read a book ever again. I would hate it, but I don't ever feel like I need to read anything. If there's anything that I really want to read, they are sequels, and one that I will mention is Words of Radiance by Brandon Sanderson. So that is the fourth book in the Stormlight Archives by Brandon Sanderson. But the reason I want to read it before the end of this year is because the fifth book in this series is published this December. These books are super massive chunks, so I gotta put a bit of fire under myself to get into this one and have it done to be ready for the publication date in December. And the other book that I feel like I really need to read by the end of this year, I absolutely do not, but I really want to, and that is Ship of Destiny by Robin Hobb. Surprise, surprise, I just want to read all of Robin Hobb's books. Like, I cannot tell you. Definitely one of my new favourite authors of last year and this year. Really subverts my expectations for what a fantasy book can be. I love her writing, I love her books. I really cannot wait to read where she takes this series. She's just such an impeccable author. So that's that. Those are all my answers to the questions. I can't believe it's already been a year since I did the last one, but here we are. Let me know some of or all of your answers to the questions down in the comments below. And if you just want to leave a comment but you don't know what to leave me a little cloud, because today's a really cloudy, rainy day and I love that. I really love that. But all that aside, I hope you're well, hope you're minding yourself, and don't forget to give me a little bit of a subscribe if you want to see more from me. Otherwise, friends, I will chat to you next week in another video. Take care. Bye bye.